With Eagles Pro Bowl running back Miles Sanders potentially hitting free agency this offseason, why are some now linking Dalvin Cook to be a possible trade candidate for the Philadelphia Eagles? Also, it looks like Seth Joyner really wants to be the Eagles defensive coordinator. Should the Eagles call Seth? I'm Thomas Mott. This is the Thomas Mott Show. What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here. Welcome to the Thomas Mott Show on a Wednesday. There's a lot going on in the offseason. A lot of stuff that comes true, a lot of stuff that doesn't come true, and a lot of stuff that's just fun to talk about in general. And I think our first story is one of those, not a lot of hard reporting behind it, but you can see why people are now connecting Dalvin Cook, yes, superstar Vikings running back Dalvin Cook, to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, this comes via thelibertyline.com, via Victor Williams. Obviously, it's very big in terms of Eagle beat writers, or I should say Eagle reporters out there, and he has a very interesting article here which is linked down below titled NFL Rumors, Eagles Among Top Teams to Land Star Running Back During Off-Season. Now you got to read a little bit to get to his actual point, but it is interesting that he would then link a guy who, as we'll see, has 3 years left on his contract in Dalvin Cook as a possible trade candidate for Philadelphia. But let's jump in, react as we always do. Quote, although Sanders rushed for a career-high 1,269 yards and 11 touchdowns last season, the Eagles have been reluctant to shell out top-end money for running backs in the past. Aside from LaShawn McCoy 11 years ago, if Sanders and GM Howie Roseman are too far apart on a new deal, the team may elect to look elsewhere. Philly won't be short on options as upcoming free agent class is loaded with running back talent. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Jamal Williams, Tony Pollard, Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt, Jeff Wilson, and David Montgomery. We'll talk more about those players here in a second. Now, here we go. Quote, another player that could be available amongst these star names is star running back Dalvin Cook, who has potentially played his last game in Minnesota. Cook is under contract for 3 more seasons, but the Vikings are projected to be roughly $24 million over the cap and have some tough decisions to make. In addition, Kevin O'Connell's offense ran the ball just 34% of the time in 2022. Not an ideal fit for Cook's play style. With $2 million of Cook's salary becoming guaranteed on March 17, Minnesota can save around $11 million in cap by designating him as a post-June 1st cut, a move that seems more imminent by the day. On a recent episode of the Snore North podcast, Vikings insider Darren Wolfson suggested Minnesota could be desperate enough to sell Cook's services for a mid-round pick. I wouldn't be shocked if the Vikings could get a third for Dalvin Cook. Now, finally, he goes on to go ahead and say this. The Eagles reportedly attempted to trade for Cook in the 2019 draft before Minnesota jumped ahead of them, so the interest has always been there. The question is whether Cook would be willing to restructure his contract upon arrival, as Roseman won't want $14 million of cap space occupied by a tailback. Conversely, the idea of adding a workhorse like Cook's to an offense consisting of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and company could entice an aggressive front office to return to the Super Bowl, end quote. So this is a fascinating article, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily link Philadelphia saying the Eagles are calling the Vikings. The Eagles are trying to go ahead and sign him. And I don't want to pitch that to you guys because a lot of people will comment down below saying, Thomas, this isn't factual. Thomas, there's no hard reporting to this. That's true, but you see how he's connecting the dots. Like, if Miles Sanders wants too much money this offseason, the Eagles are not going to re-sign him. And honestly, I'm starting to lean towards Philadelphia not re-signing Miles Sanders. Now, in my opinion, if Sanders wants to take a fair deal, fair for him, both fair for us, I would gladly have Miles Sanders back. I think they didn't use Miles Sanders enough in the postseason, especially in the Super Bowl. I think Sanders needs to be more of the number one back, and again, if Gainwell will be your number kind of 1B back, but Sanders is better than Gainwell. But if Sanders does walk, they could look to go ahead and add a savvy veteran who could be the number one back, but also split carries in a loaded backfield that includes both Boston Scott potentially getting re-signed and obviously Kenny Gainwell still on his rookie deal. Now, Dalvin makes sense, but Dalvin only makes sense if you can get him to restructure his contract and not cost you $14 million against the cap. That's where this story dies. If you trade the third-round draft pick for Dalvin Cook, fine. But if Dalvin Cook won't restructure, it's all worthless. And so while I like the idea of Dalvin Cook, I worry a little bit about his health. It makes a lot of sense for Philadelphia. You have to have Dalvin Cook bought into the idea of wanting to win versus wanting to make a bunch of money. And honestly, I have no idea what Dalvin Cook is at on that. I have no idea if Dalvin wants, let me just get one last big contract because I'm a running back and running backs don't make as much as wide receivers do or cornerbacks, really good ones do. Or does he want to go out there and try and actually get a Super Bowl ring? And honestly, Philadelphia is going to be a top destination for that. I think a lot of people are going to realize if you want to come win, you need to go ahead and join Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and company. So let me know what you guys think about this down below. I think it's interesting. Now, there are other top free agent running backs, although Josh Jacobs is probably going to get franchise tag. Tony Pollard is probably going to get franchise tag. We'll talk about Saquon Barkley in a future show. I think he is an option, But again, Philadelphia's not going to spend a lot of money on running backs, and so I'll give you kind of the more likely option, and that is Philadelphia lets Miles Sanders walk, and they go to the NFL draft. They only have 5 picks, but they go to the NFL draft and take one of the ones on the board right here as ranked by PFF. Maybe not Bijan Robinson out of Texas. Maybe he's not there at 30, let's say, as their second pick in the first round. What about Gibbs out of Alabama? I think he's fantastic. You could take him at number 30 after getting a cornerback or potentially a pass rusher at number 10 and feel really good about your first 2 picks in the draft. Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA is really, really good. I think he could be a second or third round draft pick. Obviously, the guy out of Texas A&M, Dwayne McBride at UAB, Tank Bigsby's the 6th best running back in this class out of Auburn, Kendry Miller. There's a bunch of really good running backs that you can get in this draft, as it is every year. I mean, honestly, there are always good running backs in college football. There are always good running backs coming out of the draft, and you saw that Philadelphia got Kenny Gainwell in the 5th round a couple of years ago. So you don't have to go spend big on a running back this offseason in free agency when you could just wait and get one in the NFL draft. Which would you guys rather do? I mean, Cook is the big headline here. Love the idea. You make it very exciting and stuff, and it makes for a really good thumbnail and things, but is he more likely to be an Eagle than just drafting a running back? I'll be reading all the comments as I always do. Quickly, want to jump in here. Forgot to mention it. Live show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. I'll be going live with a really, really cool Eagle creator, Josh Davis. We're going to hang out, take your questions, talk about free agency, trades, Eagles offseason, everything, National Football League. So be sure to go ahead and stay tuned. 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Don't miss it. Okay, let's go over here to Jacob Media, who has Dan Cielo. I think Dan Cielo, not my favorite guy overall because he's a Jalen Hurts hater, but he had Seth Joyner on, who also is on Jacob Media, the former Eagle defensive player. And Seth is really, clamoring to get a phone call from Philadelphia to interview for the DC job. Now, he hasn't gotten a call, and that's what's important to know here. Philadelphia's not called Seth Joyner yet, but Seth Joyner really wants to be the defensive coordinator of the Eagles, and a lot of you guys have commented on my show saying you want him to be the next DC, and so will it happen? Let's listen to Seth on this first.
So you asked me, okay, would I, if the Eagles approached me, would I? Hell yeah. In a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. Because you want to know why? Because I think that the game of football isn't that different than it was when I played. There are some differences. And most people believe that, if Seth Joyner coaches, he'd make all the players quit.
Not true.
He couldn't get along, with a defensive staff. What kind of nonsense is that? I played in the National Football League on a team for 13 years. So, in other words, you're telling me that you believe that I can't be a team guy.
He went on to say that he would take the Eagles linebacker coaching job if it was offered to him. And this is all fun, and it's all fun to speculate. And again, you did that with the Dalvin Cook story here just a couple of minutes ago. But Philly hasn't called Seth Joyner. I think that's kind of the one thing Eagle fans need to understand. They haven't called Brian Dawkins. A lot of you guys want Brian Dawkins. I love Brian Dawkins, but they haven't called him because Brian Dawkins doesn't want to be the defensive coordinator. And they haven't called Seth Joyner because Philadelphia doesn't really want Seth Joyner to be a defensive coordinator. It's nothing against Seth Joyner. I think Seth Joyner's fantastic on Jacob Media. He was obviously a great Eagle player. I would be interested. I think if I was Philadelphia, I might pick up the phone, but they clearly want someone with defensive coordinator experience. And I don't want to compare the Jeff Saturday Colts situation to what Seth Joyner would be like, but you're talking about a guy who was never coached as a defensive coordinator in the National Football League. Yes, he played. Yes, Jeff Saturday played, but to bring him in on what is a very well-established defense and really roll the dice on a guy you know nothing about from a coaching perspective, to me is not what a Super Bowl championship team is going to do this offseason. They're going to go out there and interview everybody, as we'll see. They're doing that right now, and they're going to wait until they find the perfect person who has the experience to be the Eagles' next defensive coordinator. Now, if you lost track, Bleeding Green Nation has a nice little rundown of candidates that are either in the mix or have gotten phone calls or have gotten interviews and the like. Obviously, Denard Wilson. They're still trying to talk to Vance Joseph or talking to Vance Joseph. Today's, I think they're meeting with him again. I think Vance is going to excuse me, I think Vance is going to be the guy in the end. Sean Desai, Jim Leonard, now Chris Shula is getting thrown in there. Jesse Minter is getting in there as well. They're going everywhere. They're looking in college. They're looking in the pros. They're looking at internally. They're looking at assistants. They're going everywhere for the DC position, and I just don't think Seth Joyner is even remotely a part of their decision, and that's nothing against Seth. I just don't think it's going to happen at all. Let's go ahead and wrap up with our NFL national story of the day. I want to pull up this article. It's an ESPN Plus article here, and so I want to show kind of some projected landing spots for some free agents. Now, we're going to do a lot more free agent stuff here in the Thomas Mott Show going forward, but this is a 2020 NFL free agency best team fits for top 50 available players. Now, some of this is pretty boring, right? Lamar Jackson, best fit, Baltimore Ravens. Orlando Brown, best fit, Kansas City Chiefs. How about this, though? Javon Hargrave, best fit, Seattle Seahawks. Hargrave is one of those players I told you Philadelphia needs to try and re-sign, but they're probably not going to be able to afford Javon Hargrave. Expect Hargrave to go get a big bag somewhere else, and here's a good example. He's number 3 best player in free agency, and he's probably going to be poached away from Philadelphia. Teron Payne going back to Washington. Geno Smith going back to Seattle. Derek Carr, best fit is the Saints. I think as Eagle fans, you should hope that Derek Carr stays out of the NFC. That way the quarterback group in the NFC remains pretty porous. Nice if Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr ended up in the AFC. But if I was Derek Carr, I would come to the NFC and the AFC and the NFC South because it stinks. So it makes sense. Mike McGlinchey, how about him to the Chicago Bears? Saquon Barkley, best fit, New York Giants, although, I don't know, maybe the franchise tag is in play there. Jamel Dean, the cornerback, best fit is Atlanta. That makes some sense. Daniel Jones, I think he probably will re-sign with the Giants. The question is going to be how much money. Jesse Bates, always an Eagle conversation this past year. He is a best fit as the Cleveland Browns. Dalton Schultz, the Chargers. James Bradbury, Arizona Cardinals. That would make some sense. Follow Jonathan Gannon and try and help out what was a really bad defense that past year. You like this one? Number 14, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, best fit Philadelphia. You start going through these, and there really isn't one that would really reach out to you as being shocking, except for, let me see if I can go ahead and find it here. It was Jimmy Garoppolo to the Jets. That means no Aaron Rodgers. And Odell Beckham to the Dallas Cowboys. Remember how much drama there was around OBJ during the season last year, or I guess this past season, where it was like, oh, who's he going to sign with? He's for sure a Cowboy. He's flying to go see Jerry. Oh, the Cowboys say his knee's not ready, blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of tired of the OBJ stuff. I don't think OBJ is going to come back and ever be the elite wide receiver he once was, but Dallas continues to kind of be that option, although if I was the Cowboys, I'd get a legit number 2 alongside CeeDee Lamb instead of someone who might not actually be a really good number 2. Remember, got teams like Atlanta, teams like the Raiders you see here, they have a ton of money in free agency. They're going to be very, very busy in free agency. How about Isaac Seumalo? Best fit is the Colts. That makes sense, right? I mean, opposite of Quentin Nelson and obviously going to his former offensive coordinator, now head coach, and Shane Steichen. Again, those are 2 players in both Isaac Seumalo and Javon Hargrave who we expect to leave, and these are pretty good fits, honestly. TJ Edwards to the Atlanta Falcons. You could lose TJ Edwards this offseason. If they lose TJ Edwards, if you put Dean at center or at middle linebacker, and then are you drafting somebody? Are you re-signing Kaiser White to play outside linebacker? It'd be very interesting if they were to keep White and lose TJ Edwards versus keep TJ Edwards like I want them to do and lose Kaiser White. Brandon Graham, best fit Philadelphia. Obviously, he's not going anywhere. And then other than that, there really isn't another shocking, I would say, place to sign other than Sam Darnold being the best fit for the Atlanta Falcons, which is a little strange. They have Desmond Ridder, but not sure what's going on there. Free agency is going to be crazy. It's going to be so much fun. And I'm telling you, we're going to do everything I can to have a really, really good offseason covering the National Football League for you guys here. And so subscribe. We just hit 9,000 subs on the Thomas Mott Show. I asked for it yesterday and you guys delivered. Let's try and get 10,000 here over the next couple of days. And by the way, doing a live show tonight, 7 p.m. I want to make sure I get that in there. Live show tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Be sure to go ahead and jump in. Myself and Josh Davis are going to hang out and talk Eagles and the National Football League and take your guys' questions. So all the time we have for today. I'll see you guys tonight. This is Thomas Mott. I'm Thomas Mott. This has been the Thomas Mott Show.